What was the moment you couldn't look at your partner the same way again? You don't get to have an opinion unless you paid for it. My ex said that to me after I expressed that I didn't like the concert he dragged me to. He had changed plans halfway through our date because he found out his boss, whom he idolized, was going to a pop concert. And suddenly, he wanted to go too. I spent most of the concert outside the venue smoking cigarettes with a friend who bartended there. I texted him that I was going home because I wasn't enjoying myself, and he stormed out of the venue, forcing me to go back to his apartment while yelling at me the entire way. We ended up in a huge argument. He screamed at me for half an hour, and I finally left around 3 in the morning. I could never look at him the same way after that and broke up with him 2 months later. Story 2. He made me pick up food, pasta with sauce, that he had dropped on the floor using my own hands even though he knew I have sensory issues that make me gag uncontrollably if I touch food with my hands. I can only handle dry foods like bread. I'm autistic, so this isn't just not liking it. It's literally unbearable for me. I begged him to let me use the sweeper since we didn't have towels, so at least I wouldn't have to touch it. He made me do it in front of his friends and mocked me the whole time. I left him on Thursday. Story 3. 2 weeks after I got essayed, my ex-fiance told me it was because of my dark red hair, that it was too attention-seeking. It was a stranger, not him, who essayed me. Before that, he'd often said he'd love it if I changed my hair color, but I always refused because I loved it. He used the essay incident to play mind games with me. In the end, I changed my hair color and changed the status of our relationship from fiance to ex. Story 4. He made me carry our 40-pound dog up and down the outside stairs while I was pregnant, which meant I couldn't even use the handrails. The entire pregnancy and early postpartum period were a real eye-opener about the kind of person he is. I'd always known he was kind of a jerk, but I thought that while I was carrying his child, he would at least be a little nicer. He wasn't. If even that couldn't make him treat me better, I don't think anything ever would. Story 5. We were together for 3 years, and the housing market was rising so fast that there was a good chance we would never be able to buy a house. I found an amazing deal on a repo, did all the work, and won the bid in court. I had to borrow about $8,000 from my parents to make it work, which I planned to pay back over the next year. In the 2 months before we took possession, we found out her 10-plus-year-old cat had diabetes. She refused to put it down and racked up a $3,500 vet bill just weeks before taking possession of a house that needed $25,000 in renovations to move in. A week before possession, her wealthy college friend called and asked her to be a bridesmaid in a destination wedding in Hawaii for the low cost of $5,000. She didn't discuss it with me and immediately agreed. It literally made things impossible. I had to borrow more money from my dad, wait another year before starting to pay him back, and we were completely crippled financially. Every tank of gas meant missing meals. Any extra bill increased already crushing debt. Under that stress and pressure, after a year and a half, she left me for a guy at work who was more carefree. The kicker? She didn't contribute a penny to the house. After she left, her rich dad called me, giving me the name of the big city lawyer he planned to hire if I didn't sell the house and give her half. I told him to F off and contacted my own lawyer. My lawyer looked at the name of the lawyer her dad intended to use and immediately told me not to bother fighting it. Just call her dad and apologize. Then he'd draw up the paperwork giving her half of everything. Story 6. My ex-boyfriend. He would ghost me over the smallest inconveniences for up to a week. He constantly brushed me off whenever I tried to bring up something that was bothering me. He made me cry all the time, making me feel like a terrible person just for asking for the bare minimum. Being in a long-distance relationship, he made me feel guilty for not being able to meet up when I was in a rough spot. He missed and dismissed our 2-year anniversary, then came back only to rub it in that he had moved on. Something in me clicked after I'd waited 2 months for him to return with no explanation. He would ignore me for hours to play games. He blocked me constantly, then reappeared suddenly, which caused me so much anxiety, I would violently vomit. We broke up at least once a month. By the time I got fed up, I realized he wasn't who I thought he was. I had made him special by creating an idealized image in my mind, one that didn't reflect who he actually was. Story 7. He said Hitler was right for offing disabled people, arguing that in the wild animals kill their young if they're born with defects and can't survive. For context, I am disabled. Story 8. 3:15 a.m. The past 3 hours had been horrific, chaotic, emotionally draining, and numbing. The police at the emergency room told me I was cleared and wouldn't be charged with anything, that I was free to go. One officer shook my hand, apologizing for keeping me longer than necessary, but explained they couldn't let me leave while the investigation was ongoing. Another gave me a gentle hug, and they showed me to a payphone. I called her. It took a few rings for her to answer, groggy, understandably so. Hello? Hey, it's me. I'm so sorry to call in the middle of the night. I'm going to be okay. We both will. But we were in a car accident tonight. It was bad. 2 people in the other car died. His van is totaled. I'm a mess. I need a ride home. I know it's a lot to ask, but I need to be home. Call me tomorrow. I'm sleeping. Click. I still hear that line and that click every time I see headlights coming at me. I called my mom. She answered after 4 rings. I explained the same thing and she said, "Here, give your stepdad directions while I put some coffee on." It was a 7-hour drive. They were there by 9:30. I was too deep in PTSD and trauma to process anything, so I didn't break up with her. I just let life lead me for a while until the mental fog lifted. I could never get over it, so eventually I ended things, inventing another reason rather than admitting the truth, that I was still upset over what had happened ages ago, and too paralyzed to do anything about it back then. Story 9. He just watched and stayed quiet while his mother spent an hour explaining why I'm not good enough for her. Son, that I'm too stupid, will never get my dream job, that I'm as crazy as his last 4 ex-girlfriends, and that I should see a psychiatrist. All this after I had spent 2 months cleaning her house, getting her groceries, managing her Instagram account for her art, and taking care of her garden. I had even given my last money to her son. Later, he said, "Don't be so sensitive. You know how my mother is. Deal with it." Something died in me that day. I realized he would never take my side and was completely indifferent. A mama's boy, as the following months made painfully clear. Story 10. I'd been in love with this man for almost 5 years, in an on and off relationship. No matter what he did, I couldn't manage to fall out of love with him, and I'd take him back every time he wandered back into my life. One day, he came home from the strip club after lying about where he'd been. I asked if I could look at his phone. He agreed, and I discovered him messaging multiple girls on Instagram, even girls who weren't responding, including at least one dancer from the club that night, asking if she was going to be in. No replies. These girls were ignoring him, and yet he was still risking our relationship and willing to hurt me to message them. Something inside me just switched. I was still hurt and sad as I packed my things and moved out of his apartment, but I realized I didn't love him anymore. After seeing all that I didn't know about him, I don't think I ever truly loved him. I loved an idea I'd created in my head, which is why it was so difficult to get over him. But the real him? I don't even like that guy, let alone love him. Story 11. When we moved into a new apartment, my mom came with my sister to help, without telling him beforehand. He knew about my sister and her boyfriend, but my mom came along because she had the day off. My mom had a hip issue and struggled to walk, and when she arrived, my ex said to my sister's boyfriend, "What is the cripple doing here?" That was the end of us. Story 12. She decided to break up with me 3 days before New Year's plans to instantly hook up with her now partner, who was just a friend and whom I wasn't allowed to see a month before the breakup. I trusted her. I'd known her for 8 years. It completely shattered me. I was having nightmares about it, and she reassured me on the day of the breakup only to end things while I was seeking support. Then my last proper ex emotionally cheated on me 4 months in, when I was fully invested in the relationship. I'd never fallen so hard in my life. I forgave her, but I couldn't look at her the same way for 4 years. After the relationships I've had at 22, I've given up on love. I constantly get cheated on because I'm boring or uninteresting. My exes are in happy relationships. I can't help but feel like I'll be alone forever. Story 13. Yesterday, told my partner that during a doctor's visit I'd scheduled to discuss new symptoms. The doctor felt something in my abdomen and sent me for same-day imaging. My husband responded, "I'm sorry, that must be rough. I've been thinking about strengthening my core during workouts. I think it'll make my squats better." This morning, when I told him how much that response hurt my feelings, he argued about why he thought I didn't want to talk about it and never once tried to comfort me or make it right. So, probably that. Story 14. He hijacked my phone and computer. I have a $1,000 smartphone that is now just an emulation of my original phone, and my brand new computer was embedded with Trojans and malware. He also put an internet blocker on our network so he can shut me down. He deleted the email address I used for everything, my Samsung account, OneDrive, and Microsoft. I cannot figure out what I did to deserve that. I have been faithful. I am a good cook. And I have never denied him intimacy or anything else. I just do not understand. I am having trouble trusting him now. Story 15. When we were less than a year into dating, he invited me to his brother's wedding. His half-brother, someone I'd never met, was immediately combative and antagonistic toward me about everything. He kept looking me up and down, lingering on my cleavage. I've always stood up to shitty men, so by lunch, I gave him a piece of my mind. On the walk back to the hotel, the discomfort finally hit me. By the time we were getting ready for the ceremony, I was shaking. My partner was furious. He called his family and threatened to leave the wedding right then and there. I still remember him pacing in the bathroom, wearing just his shoes and the dress pants from the suit we'd picked out together, cutting his mom off mid-sentence to say, "No, you need to listen to me. No talking, no excuses." During the entire wedding, he stayed between me and his half and his brother like a shield, and we left promptly the next day after lunch. No one, not even my biological father, had ever stood up for me against their own family before. I'd always been told to just deal with it, that they're family. He didn't question me for a second. Once he saw the behavior, he said he couldn't unsee it, and it disgusted him. He refuses to ever see his half-brother again, and has been deeply protective of me with his family ever since. I still think about that a lot. Story 16. At our wedding, he told everyone how great it was that he'd paid for the whole thing. He hadn't. My parents did, and he didn't contribute a penny. It was extremely embarrassing when one of his friends commented to my mom about how nice it was that my ex had paid. She didn't correct him. Not her style, but it put all the small lies I'd watched him tell to boost his ego into sharp perspective. The marriage didn't last long after that. I realized I just didn't like him as a person. Story 17. My partner of 14 years, about 7 years in with 2 kids, we were truly very close. I found some pictures of my sister in a hidden file on his phone. When I asked him about it, he brushed it off, saying he had a weird, intimate dream about her. I let it go. A few months later, I found messages between them. I wouldn't say he cheated, but he definitely crossed the line. He told her about the dream, told her not to tell me they talked, and told her he had pictures. She was flattered and didn't tell me, which made it even worse. I told him to never talk to her again. A couple of months later, he had a few phone calls with her behind my back, just to say happy birthday and such, but who knows what else. After I found out, I threatened to leave if he reached out again. He hasn't. I stayed because he never actually cheated, and we have a family. The kids adore him, but just the fact that he fantasized about my sister and kept crossing boundaries has affected me. I loved him deeply once. I still love him, and he is an amazing father and spouse, but I don't know if I'll ever look at him the same way or love him like I did. Story 18. Let's see. Here's a collection of things that made me view exes very differently afterward. One ex had explicit pictures of his ex-girlfriend on his phone. When I saw them, he immediately ran to the bathroom and locked himself in to delete the evidence instead of showing me their texts. After that, I could never take him seriously or trust him. Another ex told an S-worker that he wanted to do it with her in the bed we shared. While messaging her, I found out she was actually a man. Another ex, whom I was about to move to a different city with, had a document about bringing his Chinese wife and child to America. He had never mentioned them during the over 1 year we were together. Another ex put on an entire outfit of mine and got excited wearing my clothes. Those $100+ Lululemon leggings were stretched out and ruined forever. Story 19. On our 6-year anniversary, he revealed that he never wanted to get married. He called it a concept with patriarchal roots and said he didn't want the government involved in his personal business. This was the first time he had clearly expressed that he never wanted marriage. Meanwhile, hopeless romantic that I am, I had daydreamed and fantasized about my wedding since I was very young. Legal marriage also provides certain rights and privileges that a domestic partner doesn't have, and I had long expressed that I eventually wanted to get married. Part of my affection for him died that day. Over the next year and a half, our relationship became colder and colder. Living together turned into mere cohabitation instead of truly sharing life together. After critically assessing the state of our relationship, my lack of satisfaction, and realizing I was staying out of fear of change rather than love, I finally broke things off this past August. I am so much better off for it. Story 20. It might sound like a small incident to a lot of people, but it was unforgettable for me. While we were dating, we walked past a car park barrier that suddenly came down and hit his head. His glasses flew across the road, and the injury looked serious. Instead of saying ouch or looking for his glasses or reacting like most people would, he just held his head and exclaimed, "OMG, thankfully it didn't hit you. Wait, it didn't hit you, right?" In this raw, instinctual tone. For someone like me who grew up without a lot of love and was never prioritized in my family, I knew right then that he was the one for me. Fast forward 12 years, and we're married with 2 little babies and a rescue dog. Story 21. he lied about his ability to legally possess firearms. Throughout our entire relationship, I believed he was properly licensed and registered through the proper channels. He wasn't. He actually belonged to a class of people barred from owning guns due to past crimes. While we were living together, if he had been caught, I could have been in serious legal trouble too because of his actions. We divorced for many reasons, but finding that out definitely played a huge role. Story 22. I wanted to say getting physical until unconscious, but I guess not since we later got back together. I think it was this incident a year later. I had a large ovarian cyst that caused abdominal hemorrhaging and needed surgery, but blood work delayed the operation by a week. I also had a 40°C fever from H1N1. He demanded I split my antivirals with him until he got a prescription too, claiming he suddenly felt an itch in his throat. At home, I needed help with basic tasks, like walking the dog, but the -20°C air outside made it nearly impossible to breathe. While arguing about his refusal to help, he said, "I must not be so sick if I had the energy to get angry." When I tried to kick him out, he grabbed my arm. I was seething and threatened to call the police, and that was it. I reached some kind of boiling point, figuratively and literally. Story 23. With my ex, it was the constant verbal abuse. He was always calling me horrible names and saying awful things. Minutes later, he would act like nothing had happened. Then he would flip it back on me, saying things like, "You always dwell on stuff. I said I was sorry. Let it go. Just because you say you're sorry doesn't erase what you said or did. Words can't be taken back." Once, he got a scam call on his phone. I was in the next room doing my makeup, but I could hear him. The person on the other end had a Middle Eastern accent. My ex, a Marine Corps veteran who had served in Afghanistan, started messing with the caller, but then his voice changed. I heard him say, "I probably killed members of your frigging family when I was over there. You piece of shit. Don't ever call me again." I know it was a scammer, a lowlife, but my ex crossed a line. There was a menacing satisfaction in the way he said it, and it shook me to my core. After that, I could never look at him the same way again. Story 24. She spent the money we were supposed to use to move on a new car. And that's when she told me we were staying in that city. She also said my job meant nothing to her and that she didn't care whether I lost it or not, that my contributions to our household meant nothing. It was a really sad week for me. Story 25. She cheated on me with a homeless guy in his tent. She kept saying she was passing out supplies to people in need. Turns out she was passing out more than just food. Gave a whole new meaning to the term "she's made for the streets." Story 26. Jealousy issues ran throughout our relationship. She constantly asked to check my phone, which didn't bother me because I've always been faithful. When we went long distance, she worried I'd met someone else and called me crying about it multiple times. Then she suddenly broke up with me, blaming the distance and other factors. Guess who posted pictures with her new boyfriend just a couple of weeks later? I was seriously considering uprooting my life for her, only to realize she probably just wanted whoever was available. I put up with nearly 2 years of some of the most insane jealousy you can imagine, just for her to end up doing everything she accused me of. Story 27. He refused to get vaccinated or quarantine. Knowingly exposed his dad, who had lung problems, to COVID, and his dad died. Story 28. My cats didn't like him. They're very social and usually like everyone, but for some reason they avoided my ex like the plague. He had already been showing some concerning signs, not quite red flags, but close, so I took their reaction seriously and broke up with him. About a year later, he was arrested for domestic violence against his girlfriend at the time. My cats helped me dodge a tactical nuke, and they got a lot of treats that week. Story 29. We had her parents over for a chat, watching TV and such, when she came into the room and announced she had just had a miscarriage. Without pausing, she asked who wanted coffee and walked off. We just sat there, stunned. We didn't know she was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it still stung like hell that she hadn't told me in private or shown the slightest bit of sadness or care. I never really forgave her for that. We divorced more than 20 years ago, but I still think about how strange it was whenever these questions pop up. Story 30. My husband. I no longer trust him completely. 7 years ago, our home was foreclosed on, and I didn't even know it was happening until 3.5 weeks beforehand. He has always handled his paycheck, but badly. If I had managed it, bills would have been paid on time and this wouldn't have happened. He never told me how much he made, even when I asked. He would just say, enough. He didn't gamble, use drugs, take excessive medication, drink, or see or support other women. We had the house payment, utilities, a car payment, and medical bills. I was a child caregiver for my nephew's twins and only earned enough for gas and incidentals. He had been acting secretive. One day, he tried to slip out, saying, nothing important, no need for you to come along. I insisted on going. He pulled up to a lawyer's office and made up a story I knew was a lie, telling me I could stay in the car. I refused. Then he said, "Why don't you wait in the waiting room?" No way. Once seated, the truth came out and I was reasonably livid. We had been married 41 years at that point. He wanted to file for bankruptcy to try to save the house. I can't remember why it didn't happen, but from that day forward, I lost trust in him. I am a reasonable person. He is retired now, and we both get SSI. I pay my medical bills on time, as well as any other bills I incur. Story 31. I reached for his phone and he grabbed my neck and squeezed for about half a minute. He most likely only stopped because he remembered my parents were right upstairs. Afterward, he tried to say he was trying a new intimate thing, but we were just sitting on the couch watching Ratchet on Netflix. We weren't doing anything intimate. I ended up staying with him for almost 5 more months after that. I stopped trusting him after the incident. I finally had the courage to leave when I got confirmation that he had been sneaking around and cheating. Most likely, the entire relationship. I think I stayed so long mostly because of low self-esteem, but he was also my first everything at age 24. Maybe I thought real relationships had ups and downs and that I should stick it out because I loved him and he said he loved me. It reminds me of the quote, "We accept the love we think we deserve." Story 32. He was repairing something with his dad, but he turned on his PS5 while his father was still explaining what to do because he didn't want to lose progress in the game. When his dad handed him the electric drill, he snapped, "Don't give it to me. I don't even know what to do with that." That was the turning point for me. I realized I wanted to break up. We're adults. You should know a little more than just how to use a controller. Story 33. I told him that his dad had stared at my chest during dinner at his parents' house. He gave a half-hearted apology, then proceeded to say he wasn't mad because I have larger breasts than average. He even blamed me for what I was wearing. When I didn't respond, he muttered under his breath, "You know, I hate when you do that." At that moment, I realized he would never willingly protect me. I waited almost a year to tell him and was met with little to no empathy. We're no longer together. He got back with an ex he had previously admitted using for banging, and when I called him out, he didn't show any real remorse. Story 34. He used to brag about debating, really belittling and arguing with his woo-woo friends online. He would tear into anyone interested in astrology, energy, vibes, etc. If it were just exploring opposing viewpoints, that would be fine, even healthy. But his intentions were clearly disingenuous. He'd often say things like, "Magical thinkers just want to believe they're special when they're not, so I can't help but challenge that." And I'd think, dude, you don't want your friend to feel special? It was weird as hell. He had a superiority complex, thinking he was intellectually above most people, while also seeing himself as a sensitive good guy. He was always acting persecuted for being a cis, straight white man with ADHD who was regularly promoted at work and making $100K a year. People didn't like him because he was so different, and they couldn't understand him. It could never be about his behavior or how he treated others. I can't stand that guy. And dumping him was absolutely the right choice. Story 35. After our daughter was born, she became a completely different person. She went from being happy, go-lucky, and unconcerned with appearances to violently materialistic. She couldn't hold a job. And when she was unemployed, she would call me at work and scream that she couldn't live like this, that all her friends got spa days and new cars when they felt down, and she wanted a new house and a Range Rover. Eventually, she secretly ran up huge debts and then demanded that I pay them off. I reached a breaking point and narrowly avoided ending everything. When I told her I was on emergency medical treatment for my mental health, she looked me in the eye and snarled, "Well, you better toughen up because you have responsibilities." Story 36. My ex is Mr. Nice Guy. Such a great guy. Everyone loves him. Yada, yada, yada. I'm bipolar, so I can't so much as raise my voice without being reminded of my anger issues. This incident was about 12 years ago, so I don't recall exactly how it started, but my ex and I were either arguing or talking intensely about something. My daughter, 2 or 3 at the time, was cranky. He yelled at her, which startled her, and she started crying. Then he picked her up and started shaking her, screaming at her to stop crying. Naturally, she cried even harder. I was horrified and screamed at him to stop. He flung her back onto the couch, kicked our puppy, who yelped, punched a dent in the wall, and stormed upstairs. That was it. Something completely shut off in me that day. Story 37. He called me on my birthday around 2 or 3 in the afternoon and kept asking with chuckles if no one was taking me out. Some weeks later, he told me he had slept with another girl and sent me her name and pictures, even though I never asked. I decided not to argue with him, but he got upset that I wasn't angry about what he did. For my mental and emotional well-being, I had to call it quits. Story 38. Earlier this year, she told me she was going to vote for Trump. I asked why. She said, "My family's always voted Republican, And that's what I'm going to keep doing. I could respect it if she genuinely thought Trump was the better option and had some reasoning to back it up. But to vote for a party just because your family does, blindly following, especially when a member of her direct family had to go to Mexico for an abortion in the past, I couldn't believe the ignorance. It felt like she was putting our theoretical future kids in jeopardy with that kind of thinking. Story 39. My ex and I were really happy for a while. The spark faded, but I was grateful to be with my best friend at the end of the day. Then, my brother died. It shook me, and I immediately moved back home to be closer to family and start a new job. A few months later, I was still exhausted from grief. After having lunch with a mutual friend, I said I was too tired to go home that day. He responded, "So, I guess you're going to use your brother being dead as an excuse from now on, huh?" I didn't even argue or respond. Before that, I had taken responsibility for my part in our issues. It would be months before I broke up with him, after realizing I loved him more than he loved me. He accused me of the opposite, but that comment alone made me see his callousness toward me. Story 40. When he had vertigo and thought it was a brain tumor, I literally lost all feelings for him after 20 years of his paranoia, hypochondria, alcohol abuse, mental and emotional abuse, and repeated legal problems. I dealt with all of it while taking care of my 3 kids, working and managing the house. My son called me home from work to tell me his dad was in the fetal position and needed to go to the ER. I walked in, saw him on the floor, and felt a rage I can't even explain. When the doctor told him it was vertigo, after I had told him it was an inner ear problem causing his dizziness and he didn't believe me, he asked what that was. The doctor said, "An inner ear problem." It's been 16 years, and I still want to go back to that day and laugh in his face. I stayed another 6 months. When I had to have a hysterectomy, instead of receiving support, I had to make him feel better because my condition was stressing him out. I was home a week from surgery and told him I was done. To this day, he thinks I lost my mind, and he believed my job as his wife was to take care of him at all times. When I told a therapist that I never worried about my kids at home when I was at work, but worried about him being home when I wasn't there, she said, "Honey, it's not your job to raise your husband. It's been 16 years, and I still don't regret walking out of that toxic relationship." Story 41. OMG. My ex was a piece of work, but honestly, so was I for being with him. My ex-husband and his friends would joke about what it would be like to get a hand job from a girl with a missing finger, saying the only reason they'd do it was to see if their D would look bigger in her hand. He enjoyed MTG. So did I, though I don't have the time to play anymore. And he and his friends would always go to a local game store. They would comment on one girl who always went there, saying things like, "She's every guy's dream girl, and she's so hot." When I pointed out that she was in high school, and it was gross for adults to be talking about her like that, they tried to play it off as, "Oh, it's because she's a gamer? That's not what you said." They were commenting on her specific looks. He ended up leaving me because I needed him to take me to the hospital, but he refused because a dungeon in WoW popped. Then, he left a screaming voicemail telling me he was leaving me while I was on my way to the hospital. I'm so glad he did leave. My life is so much better with him gone. Story 42. I had always known how bad his drinking was, but one day he went into our roommate's room. Our roommate was also a close family friend and stole his whiskey around 9 or 10 in the morning. By the time our roommate found it, half the bottle was gone. He lied to my face, as well as to my mom, brother, and roommate, swearing it wasn't him. Even later, behind closed doors, he denied it. A month later, we broke up after being together for 3 years. I will always care for and love him, but he's an addict, and nothing, no one can change that. Story 43. She stopped teaching yoga, earned her GED at age 31, enrolled in community college, transferred to a university, and graduated 7 months pregnant. She took a year off to be with our daughter, was accepted into grad school, earned her master's degree, and brought in a second income for our family. We'll be together 20 years next year, and I'll never stop being impressed. Story 44. When we had just started dating, my husband kept canceling or rescheduling dates to go visit his sick friend in the hospital. It turned out the friend was real, not an excuse, and had undergone emergency brain surgery to relieve fluid buildup and pressure. He didn't have a place where he could recover with help available, so my husband let him stay in his small condo. When the test came back and it was terminal brain cancer, my husband let him stay rent-free so his disability payments would be enough to actually enjoy life without stressing about money or feeling pressured to return to work too soon. There was also someone there to help if he needed it. During a brief period when it looked like he might live longer and he returned to work full-time, the original tumor seemed defeated before 2 new ones appeared. A few months later, my husband asked him to pay a small rent. He quietly put that money into a separate account to give back to him later, to help him get started if he was ever able to move out. My husband rearranged his one-bedroom condo to create a permanent space in the living room, so his friend could stay comfortably while the space remained usable. I was amazed by his kindness. It said so much about who he was and how he handled difficult situations. For those wondering, we all became close friends and genuinely enjoyed spending time together in that condo. Sadly, our friend passed away after about 2 years, but he didn't have to worry about money or care, and he was happy during the time he had left. He said he didn't have a bucket list. He just wanted to enjoy life with his friends and family, and he was able to do that while staying out of palliative care for as long as possible. I wish he could have seen us get married. We dressed the cardboard box containing our portion of his ashes in a tiny custom suit that matched my husband's, added googly eyes, and placed it at the head table between us. Story 45. What truly hammered it into my head that I loved him. My now partner came over and carried my beloved 75-pound elderly collie up and down the stairs of my condo twice a day so she could go to the bathroom, and he did that for months. He insisted on driving us to that awful appointment with the vet, stayed with me through the euthanasia, and even cried, despite being an emotionally avoidant man. He picked up her ashes because he knew it would be too hard for me, then spent weeks sitting on the floor earning the trust of my new rescue so she wouldn't be afraid of him. I am a very lucky woman. Believe me, I know it. Story 46. I had a pretty severe injury that I tried to downplay for years. Sometimes, when my ex was asleep, I would quietly slip out and sleep on our cheap couch when the pain got bad because it was a little more comfortable. One night, as I was setting up the couch, she came in without a word, brought the blanket from the bed, lay down on the short end of the sectional so we were head to head, and went to sleep. That relationship eventually blew up in my face. But for a few years, we were deeply in love, and I hope everyone gets the chance to feel that kind of love at least once. Story 47. He's my husband now, but before that, when we were just close friends, we already had a connection. I thought it was one-sided and never told him. Then I went through a really difficult period and finally opened up to him. I ended up staying over, crying on and off through the night, and every time I woke up upset, he woke up too and comforted me. I was close to giving up, but he helped me think through solutions and connected me with someone who could actually help me turn things around. He was simply there for me, consistently, in ways that mattered. For years. We were friends for 6 years before we got together, and I've watched him change and grow. He had his own struggles, went to therapy, and did the work to sort himself out. He shows up for me every day, and I do the same for him. I lost my job not long ago and have been in a bit of a rut, so this morning, as he was getting ready to leave, he made me a coffee in my travel mug and told me to get ready so I could walk him to the underground station. It's sunny out, and that's his way of gently getting me up, out, and started with my day. I told him I wanted to paint this morning, and he made sure I'd have the space and motivation to do it. I love him so much. Story 48. When my mother was terminally ill, we wanted to try a natural form of medication as a last hope, but it was really expensive. My sibling and I scraped together our money to get it for her. My husband, then my boyfriend, not even engaged, said he would contribute too, so we could afford a longer supply. He actually paid more than the two of us, combined, because he could. I didn't even have to ask him. He did it because he knew how much my mom meant to me and how desperate we were. He never wanted the money back, saying, "We are a couple, and share." I already loved him, of course, but in that moment I realized what a selfless person he was and that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. He asked my father for permission to propose not long before my mom passed away, so she would at least know about it. Story 49. As a single mother, I started dating again and met this guy online. On our first date, he took my almost 3-year-old son to the park with me. My son immediately sat in the mud and I had to carry him home and clean him up. My date didn't bat an eye. On our second date, my dad came from out of state to visit and he immediately got the dad test. His vibes just matched, obviously. A month into dating, I broke my collarbone after getting hit by a truck while biking. He rushed to take care of me, even though COVID restrictions meant he couldn't come into the hospital. Not even a year in, my mother passed away, and he stayed by my side the whole time, even attending her funeral with me. 2 months later, I got full custody of my son after my ex-husband messed up badly and ended up in a psych ward for a couple of weeks. My boyfriend didn't hesitate. He helped me in every way possible with my son. Not long after that, my 12-year-old dog passed on my mom's birthday. He held me, and we cried together. Since then, we've gotten a puppy, and it feels like our family is complete. We've been together 4.5 years now, and he is the best thing that's ever happened to my son and me. He has never let us down, always builds us up, and we do the same for him. I swear, I never truly knew romantic love until I met him, my best friend. Story 50. We were only dating at the time, but I asked him to take a look at my car because the windshield wiper fluid pump wasn't working. He said it wouldn't be a problem. He'd never worked on my make of car before. It's apparently incredibly difficult. But he's an excellent mechanic, so he spent hours watching YouTube videos to fix it for me. On top of that, he replaced everything that looked worn or broken, never charged me, and didn't even mention it. We'll be married 2 years this May. Story 51. My partner isn't really an animal person, but I love my cat. Despite his initial reluctance to have a pet, when we moved in together, he accepted my cat as a full member of the family. When I had to put down my beloved cat, he stayed with me the entire time, holding both me and the cat while I sobbed. He was crying too, and admitted this was why he'd been hesitant about having a pet. He's experienced a lot of loss and is understandably afraid of going through that grief again. We've since adopted a new cat. She's loving, but a total nutcase compared to my sweet old cat. Still, they've developed their own special bond. Story 52. I had a really traumatic birth and couldn't walk for months after a C-section. Our baby wouldn't latch to feed or sleep for almost a year. During that time, my husband changed my diapers and cleaned my incision because I was too scared to look at it. He fed me every meal in bed and even prepped meals for us before going back to work. Even though I was a stay-at-home mom and he worked, he slept on the floor next to our son's crib for the first 10 months of his life, waking up with him every time. I will never forget his sacrifice and kindness. He never made me feel like less of a mom for things not working out as I'd hoped. Our son and I truly think he hung the moon. I had never known a love like that, even though he had loved me deeply for many years before. You never forget how someone treats you during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. I would never wish anything bad on him, and I will care for him forever. If the time ever comes, I hope to be there for him the way he was for me. Story 53. My partner, now the father of my daughter, stayed by my side during a terrible period of anxiety and depression. We'd only been together a year and a half, and we were both 22 at the time, but he was there for me completely. He was incredible, helping me in ways I can never stop being grateful for. For months, I couldn't leave the house because I was paralyzed by anxiety. When I finally started going out again, even just 10 minutes at a time would trigger a crisis. But he was always there, supporting me. 8 years later, I still haven't forgotten that. Now our baby is 2 months old, and I've been feeling anxious again with all the hormones. As always, he's here. I love him so much. This has shown me the kind of person he truly is. Story 54. He took my phone and called my mom for me, forcing me to talk to her about our infertility struggles I'd been keeping from her for months. He knew she could comfort me when he couldn't. In that moment, I knew I'd married the right man, someone who would always try to help me through the hard times. Story 55. Seeing my partner, now husband, around animals just confirmed how good he is. We have 2 rescue dogs, both deeply terrified of men because of past abuse. With both of them, he was incredibly patient. He never forced them, never grabbed them. He just waited. I remember him sitting on the floor, scattering treats around him and grabbing a book. He would sit there for hours while the dog cautiously sniffed. Sometimes the dog wouldn't come near at all. That was okay. He'd do it again and again. I'd sometimes see him shed a tear and say, how could someone harm something so little and innocent? A few months later, they became so close that I sometimes feel like the third wheel. He's not very open with his feelings, working on it in therapy, but I can see how cuddling one of our dogs calms him down. Of them is especially tuned into his emotions. Whenever he lets out a swear or sighs in frustration, she'll stop whatever she's doing, climb up to his face, even though she's tiny, and lick him until he giggles. I swear, something magical gets activated in her. Story 56. My boyfriend has had a rough life. He and his brother experienced childhood trauma together, and his brother became a severe alcoholic. His brother passed away at the start of COVID. His parents decided living in their hometown was too difficult and moved a couple thousand miles away. Shortly after the pandemic began, my boyfriend was laid off. He was completely isolated and struggling financially because jobs in his field were scarce. I knew he had been in a dark place from the start of our relationship, but he doesn't like talking about his feelings, so I didn't fully grasp the severity of it. For the first 5 months, he refused to let me see his apartment until he started panicking about failing an RD inspection and being evicted. I thought, it can't be that bad. When he finally let me in, it was worse than I expected. Hundreds of beer cans, rotting takeout, fruit flies everywhere. The hallway was so cluttered you couldn't get through, and piles of clothes covered the bed. He thought I would leave him, but in that moment, I realized just how much I loved him. It completely broke my heart that he was in such a crisis with no one to reach out to. I let him move in with me, and it took me 14 hours to clean the whole apartment, but I did it. I'll take that story to the grave. I'll never use it against him. Now, I check in frequently to make sure his depression doesn't get severe again. Story 57. My wife told me that men don't deserve to be treated nicely, as in giving gifts, hugs, or other affection. She said that giving affection is just something men need to do, not women, and that's why she doesn't show any affection. Story 58. A few weeks ago, I came out to a coworker as bisexual. Hours later, he called me a slur. I'm a 30-year-old woman and had no idea how to process it. I've spent my whole life in the closet. I went home to my husband and tearfully told him everything about being bisexual, about having been in love with my childhood friend in the past, feeling like an imposter because I haven't really explored that part of myself while being married to a man, and about what had happened with my coworker. He held me as I cried and told me I can be gay and still be married to a man. It was like he had removed an ever-expanding balloon from my chest. I don't think I'll ever feel unsafe sharing anything with him again. Most men I've dated would have seen my meltdown as an assault on their masculinity or questioned my loyalty. I reckon I chose well. Story 59. My soul dog passed away this year. He was almost 13, and I rescued him when he was 4. He battled 3 kinds of cancer and a lifetime of health issues. When I met my husband, Cash was 9. My husband attended every doctor's appointment, gave Cash the same love and care I did, planned our lives around him without complaint, and sobbed with me when he finally developed a brain tumor he couldn't fight. We were gifted a beautiful box that lights up to hold Cash's ashes and mementos. The box requires expensive batteries to keep the lights on. My husband, who is generous and makes good money, hates spending on unnecessary or overpriced things and dislikes stockpiling. One day, I came home to a huge box of batteries for Cash's box. My husband said we need to turn the box on every night and not worry about how often the batteries are replaced. It's such a small gesture, but it means the world to me. I love him so very much. Story 60. When I got sick with COVID, my ex took care of all my bills, my house, my plants, and my car. I spent 40 days in the hospital, 13 of them in a coma. She shouldered the burden of parenting alone and still managed everything for me. We had been divorced for a few years at that point. I have eternal respect for her for that. Story 61. My husband and I had a whirlwind start. We got pregnant right away and basically got to know each other as a couple during that time, trying to take it slow, but also baby. When our little one was 6 months old, my beloved old cat, who I'd had since 4th grade, 18 and a half years, suddenly lost use of his back legs. We rushed him to the emergency vet, and it turned out he had cancer. He had to be put down then and there. Sparky was a great cat. People always commented on how chill and friendly he was. He used to cuddle up to me and hold my hand during hard times growing up. He had been with me through so much. Of course, I was heartbroken. My then boyfriend, who had only lived with him for a year, came with me to help hold my sweet boy as he left this world. I remember looking up and seeing tears on his face. Had never seen him cry before. He's very stoic and tough, but my cat's death hit him hard too. That touched me so much. We've been together 14 years now, and he's done countless things that mean even more than that moment, but I always remember it. It showed me who he really is at heart. R.I.P. Sparky, bestest kitty. Story 62. I was dating a girl and we were sitting in the McDonald's car park in my hometown eating our food. My hometown is a little rough around the edges and she came from a slightly posher town. Her family weren't rich, but acted like they were. When she finished, she opened the car door and dumped her rubbish on the car park floor. I asked her what the hell she was doing. And she said, "What? It's only insert my hometown." I absolutely lost it and refused to drive her home until she picked it up and put it in the bin, which was only 20 feet away. Needless to say, we didn't end up together. Story 63. My ex, who I was monogamous with, suddenly insisted that we be polyamorous. I didn't want to, but she convinced me. Then she insisted I date her best friend, who I wasn't particularly into. I was told I could, of course, choose anyone else I wanted. Then I met a girl who truly amazed me and made me happy. My ex and her best friend, whom I was also seeing, spent 2 months trying to convince me that the new girl wasn't right for me. They claimed my happiness was just a result of a mental health issue and that I needed to ask my psychiatrist about a grippy socks vacation. Their words. This was especially cruel given that my neuroscientist ex had gaslit me for years into believing I couldn't trust my own mind. Long story short, I ditched them and married the girl they didn't want me to be with. I wake up every single day happy about that decision. Story 64. He was mad that I decided to spend Christmas with my family that year. He didn't even like the holiday. He just didn't want me to go see them. It was also my birthday and he ignored me the whole day, never acknowledging it. But God forbid I do something with my friends. Then, in the evening, he put on a Holocaust documentary for us to watch without even asking. I should have left then, but I was young and scared. It took me another 8 years to finally walk away. Story 65. I wasn't a good partner in my last relationship. I was very depressed, very angry, and instead of seeking help, I drank. I pushed her away and drank. We split, rightfully so. I went away and seemed to get healthy, but when life didn't magically get better, I fell back into drinking. Before that, we had made up, communicated, and were very much in love, but we knew it wasn't working and never would. Then the communication stopped. I saw her on the street and she practically ran from me. She wouldn't even say hello. That changed my perspective. It took some time to get my head in order and realize how sick I really was, not just drunk. I fully bear responsibility for the mess I made of that relationship and still feel the grief nearly 2 years later. But I'm 5 months sober now. I survived an operation for a deadly infection that almost killed me, including a coma and septic shock. Coming out the other side, I'm more aware and my anxiety and depression are lower than they've ever been. Take notice of yourself. Take care of yourself. Love yourself. Be confident in your choices and always pay attention, not just to yourself, but to your partner's wants and needs. Be confident in your standards. Honestly, I bent over backward in that relationship, doing things I didn't truly believe in because I loved that person so much. That's okay. I'm happier now, still dealing with depression, definitely healthier, and I'm actively working on myself. Story 66. From my prior relationship. I knew she wasn't the one when she tried to cook dinner and refused to put any seasonings in it, not even salt. And pepper. Who does that? From my current relationship, early on, about a month after we met, she had to stay at my place for a week for reasons that aren't important here. I knew she was the one, when after the week was over, I found myself missing her presence in my apartment almost immediately. 6 years later, we celebrated our first wedding anniversary this past October. Story 67. They snapped at me while I was talking, saying they were sick of my conversation and that I talk about the same things all the time. This was a while ago. I spoke to them about it soon after and pointed out that they also have certain topics they return to frequently. They acknowledged that, and we dropped it. We have been together 8 years now. I do not bring up that comment anymore. But since then, I sometimes struggle with my confidence when talking to my partner and worry that I am boring them. I used to believe we found each other interesting simply because we loved each other. Now, my faith in that is not as strong. Story 68. My ex cheated on me by sleeping with someone else, and I found out by looking through his phone. I had a really bad gut instinct and woke up with that feeling. His friend said he was bragging about cheating on the girl back home, even though I was literally at an out-of-state college, at a nicer college than him, one he wanted to get into. Later, he claimed the girl essayed him to avoid accountability and pretend he hadn't cheated. She didn't. He's a terrible person, but the cheating and the emotional and mental abuse have affected me deeply for years. Story 69. I was seeing this guy for a short time. After an event, we got to my car and discovered it wouldn't open. It was stuck, and we couldn't figure out why. I called AOA, and instead of waiting with me, he had his friend, who lived 2 to 3 minutes away, come pick him up so I would have to deal with it myself. By the way, AOA arrived about 20 minutes later, and it turned out to be a very simple fix. That same week, he had dental work done and expected me to help him. What actually happened was him barking unclear orders at me, kind of like the pink tote story going around on TikTok. He got upset when I didn't understand one of his vague demands, and if I asked for clarification, he would get more frustrated and call me stupid. I realized how absurd this was. Coming from someone who couldn't even be supportive for 20 minutes over something so minor. I told him, "Why the hell should I help you?" We fought, and I left. Story 70. I got into a car crash in my ex's car. I wasn't at fault and was insured to drive it. I called her to ask for her insurance information and mentioned that I might have to go to the hospital. All she did was moan and give short, curt responses over the phone. I got a ride back home, and the first thing she said when I walked in was, "Why does everything always have to happen to me? I have nice things." Not even a simple, "Are you okay?" or any kind of comfort. Insurance ended up covering the entire cost of her car, but she made a point of telling everyone she had to pay out of pocket and that I refused to help. That was the start of a steady and consistent decline in how she treated me. Story 71. I got pregnant, and my SO and I were in a rough spot financially, so we decided to have an abortion. It was traumatic and painful, and I was home alone recovering for about 3 days. When I went back to work, I was on a night shift. I came home and tried to crawl into bed and cuddle him, but he immediately got up and went to shower. It felt weird and gave me a strange vibe. I tried lying down for a bit, but his phone started going off. I looked at it and found a WhatsApp messenger code sent to him in a text. He didn't have the app, so I re-downloaded it and discovered an entire conversation of him cheating on me. It turned out he was on Grindr, exploring his sexuality. Story 72. I told him when I was 13 weeks pregnant that I would move out if his felon roommate didn't leave by the time I reached my third trimester. I reminded him of this throughout my pregnancy. When I was 30 weeks pregnant, I moved out, and he acted like I had abandoned him out of nowhere. That was when I gave up on him. Story 73. I dated a girl who constantly talked about wanting kids. I would go to her house after work and sometimes stay over on days off. Her mother volunteered to babysit a 9-year-old girl whose dad had left and whose mom had to work extra hours. I would often offer to play a board game with her and my girlfriend. I was sympathetic since my dad left when I was 11. By the time I got there, it was usually about an hour before the girl got picked up. After a week or two, my girlfriend said I was giving her too little attention and that we either had to spend time alone in her room or go out while the girl was there. I broke up with her and went home. Story 74. When we were still fairly new in our relationship, he asked me to pick him up and take him to the nearest dealership so he could handle a few things, as he had just moved states. We pull up in my old car, and he starts talking about maybe just switching cars instead, mentioning random ones on the lot. He tells me to pull into one particular spot next to a car he said he really liked. He asked what I thought of it, then went silent for a moment and said he was glad I liked it because it was now mine. While I was at work, he had picked it out and had everything ready for me. He absolutely refused to let me drive my old car back home, saying it wasn't safe to drive anymore, and since it was no longer mine, why would I? 6 years later, I still have that car, and we now have 2 little boys together. Edit. A few years later, he did the same for my mom. This isn't a humble brag. Life has been challenging at times, but he has always made sure I've been safe and protected. Story 75. My parents have always struggled financially, even though they worked hard their whole lives. When we found out my mom needed surgery, she was planning not to get it because she couldn't afford it. I suggested that we help pay for it, and my husband agreed without hesitation. We were doing well financially, but it was still a huge chunk of our savings. We got cash from the bank, and he found a random friend to deliver it to them anonymously, knowing she wouldn't accept it otherwise. Every time I get annoyed at my husband for something, I think back on that moment. Story 76. We weren't dating yet, but my now husband told me I could call him whenever. One night, I got home from work late, and my mom called to say my dad had had a stroke. The whole family rushed to the hospital. I texted my then boyfriend, who went to bed maybe an hour later, and I got back to my apartment around 2 a.m. I couldn't stand the silence and couldn't sleep, so I called my husband. I apologized 1,000,000 times for calling so late, but he wasn't upset at all. He was very comforting, helped me relax, and kept my mind off things. He stayed on the phone with me until he had to get ready for work around 5 a.m. I didn't go anywhere besides my apartment, the hospital, work, or my parents' house for a good month, and he made sure I had food. I dumped my boyfriend the next time I saw him. He never visited me during that time and only wanted me to go to him. But I'll admit I was a little dumb and dated another guy for a month before I got my wits together. In my defense, I was 20. My husband had asked me on a date right before I got with the second guy. I asked if he still wanted to go, and fortunately, he did. Story 77. My ex told me that feeding cats any food cooked with onions or garlic was fine, and that I was overreacting when I got upset at my mom for doing so. We were all 3 physically present. I was trying to explain to my mom that these foods are highly toxic to cats and dogs, but she's hard-headed, and I have to be pushy about things like this. Instead of supporting me, my ex validated my mom, saying I was overreacting and that it was okay. I even showed them numerous sources from Google to prove it. Of course, it changed how I saw her. She flat out refused to admit that feeding cats something dangerous could harm them. That's one of the reasons she's my ex now. Not the biggest reason, but definitely one of the good ones. Story 78. He tried forcing me back into full-time work when my son was small, even though we'd agreed I would stay at home until he started school. I was also expected to handle all the childcare myself. On top of that, he tried to bully me into being intimate. The last straw came when he flat out refused my request to have a lie-in once a week. In that moment, I felt the last of my feelings for him die, and I could never see him the same way again. We split soon afterward. Story 79. My sister is hard of hearing due to a bad case of chickenpox as a kid before the vaccine was available. My husband is the first person I ever dated who made a real effort to accommodate her hearing difficulties. Other boyfriends never treated her any differently, which was part of the problem. She can read lips, but she needs you to look directly at her. My husband makes sure to stand directly in front of her or sit on the side she hears best from. He also learned some functional ASL from me for times when we're in noisy places. Our parents don't sign. Hearing parents rarely do. So we only sign when they aren't around. About 15 years ago, a hearing aid came out that would work for her type of hearing loss. However, she had been hard of hearing so long that the noise of the world was overwhelming. so she only uses the aids at work. At the time, I was explaining this to a now ex-boyfriend. He got so upset, saying my sister was an idiot for not wanting to be normal. During the argument, I also discovered he didn't like my cat. I dropped him like a hot turd. My husband has done so many incredible things over the years that reaffirm why I love him so much. But this was the first one I noticed early on. Story 80. Before my partner and I were dating, I was going through a rough time getting over my ex-boyfriend. He had ditched me for a girl in another state and said he wanted a break. A break meaning a breakup, but he was too scared to actually say it. I had put a lot into that relationship, and moving on was hard. My current partner and I were good friends at the time, and I didn't know who else to talk to. I called them, and we talked for 1 or 2 hours. What they said were some of the kindest words I've ever heard from anyone. I pulled myself together and eventually got over my ex. Honestly, I think that phone call was when I first started seeing them as more than just a friend. We kept talking every day after that and eventually started dating. We've been together almost 4 years now, and I'm unbelievably happy with them. They are the most thoughtful and loving person I've ever met, and I'm so thankful for them. Story 81. The day our child was born, I was lying in the hospital bed after a C-section. My husband, the one who had brought up having kids in the first place and repeatedly promised he would provide equal help and not leave me as the default parent, told me to call the nurse when I asked him to help change a diaper. Then he went home to play video games. He returned later and positioned a cot in front of the bathroom door, refusing to wake so I could use it. The nurse hated him. She literally came into the room and repeatedly kicked his cot when he wouldn't get up. Up until that day, I had worn rose-colored glasses regarding that man. You can guess how the newborn phase went with that lazy a-hole. Story 82. When I had just moved to Japan, I was strolling around the city with my now ex when we came across a blue tarp village, a homeless camp. He commented that it was disgusting, and I agreed that it was sad that people had to live like that. But then he said the police should just clear them all out. I think that was the beginning of the end for us. By contrast, on an early date with my current partner of 15 years, we were sitting in a city center park when an unhoused person approached us asking for money. This is actually pretty rare in Japan, as most people are too proud to ask for help. My partner insisted the man join us at the fast food restaurant we were headed to, bought him a meal, and we all ate and talked together. Then, we went to a convenience store to get some drinks and food for him to take with him. I later had to give my partner his subway fare because he had given the man his last few hundred yen and was planning to walk 5 kilometers home. Story 83. An ex had a pretty serious dissociative disorder. When she dissociated, she would often become childlike, but also self-harming. By this point, we were on hospitalization number 5 in about a year and a half, and we had broken up and gotten back together more times than I could count. The hospital had a staff member assigned to watch dangerous patients. While dissociated, she started verbally attacking him, calling him a piece of shit, saying he had a small dong, and making up lies about him hurting her. I was there the whole time. He didn't. I tried to get her to stop abusing him, who was just doing his job. She turned to me, looking surprised, but also staring right through me. Then I suddenly saw black diarrhea spread out below her on the hospital bed. She had this look like she'd just done an oopsie, and immediately went back to verbally abusing the staff member. I lost all attraction to her that night, and she didn't understand why, despite me explaining everything above. Story 84. My ex broke up with me out of nowhere after nearly 4 years together. We had renewed the lease on our apartment in March, and she broke up with me in May. No warning, no ultimatum, no intervention or anything. Just, I'm no longer happy and we can't work on this. I did convince her to keep trying, to communicate what she wasn't happy with, and that lasted about a month. After a month of changed routines, dates, gigs, and gestures, I asked her how she felt. She said she didn't know, felt numb, and needed to clear her head. So she stayed with her cousins for a week. She left me in the dark, came back, and ended things. I told her it wasn't fair that I had to deal with that after she had processed it for months, and she told me that's just how breakups work. At the time, I took it at face value, but now, 5 months later, I resent that. That's not how breakups work. That's how an avoidant coward handles a breakup. I didn't spend 4 years with someone to be tossed aside with. Minimal effort. What hurts more is knowing she went to friends and others for advice, but didn't talk to me. The one person who needed to know he was making mistakes. I'm still a bit salty about it, but it's given me clarity. In the first couple of months after the breakup, I yearned for a chance to reconcile. Now, no chance. I'll never trust her to not do that again. And I sincerely hope she doesn't do that to the next guy. Story 85. A few years back, my cousin suddenly died of an OD at 26. It was very traumatic for the whole family, and we spent most of our time at my aunt's house in the weeks afterward. supporting her and each other. I didn't see my now ex much during that time, but after a couple of weeks, when things had settled down a bit, I tried to make plans with him for a date. He was very into disc golf, and it had always been a little difficult to make plans with him because he seemed to spend all his free time on it when I tried to make plans. After my cousin's death, he said he already had disc golf plans that weekend. I got a little upset because we had hardly seen each other in weeks, and I didn't understand why he couldn't cancel just once to be with me, especially considering the tragedy my family had just been through. His response was, "This isn't fair. You have no right to be upset just because I have plans. I didn't get upset with you for spending all your time at your aunt's house the last couple of weeks." He completely disregarded the fact that I had been there because someone I loved had died. I stayed with him for another 2 years, but I still see that as the beginning of the end for us. Story 86. My boyfriend and I were still pretty new, like 2 to 3 months in. I was living with my mom and we were splitting all expenses down the middle. Around Christmas, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. What we thought was just pneumonia and emphysema turned out to be much more serious. I wasn't planning on introducing my new boyfriend to my mom so quickly, but he offered to pick her up from the hospital. That was the first time he met her. He immediately took initiative, driving us to appointments, helping around the house. My mom never liked any of my friends or partners. Nobody was ever good enough for her only baby. Nobody was trustworthy. Everyone sucks. Until she met my boyfriend. He came to stay the night and ended up staying 29 straight nights. When he had to leave to take care of his own things, my mom was like, "What? Leave? Do you have to go? Are you coming back?" I had never seen her want someone around for so long. She was always such a grumpy loner. A couple of nights later, my mom was having trouble breathing and needed to go to the hospital. She declined extremely fast, was transferred to hospice, and passed away within a couple of days. We had only known about her diagnosis for a few weeks, most of which she was in the hospital and loopy from a combination of medication and hypoxia. I never got a chance to have a coherent conversation with her about her cancer or our plans. She wasn't really aware of her whereabouts or much else. I'm her only child and only relative. So I was expected to make all of these decisions for her, deciding her course of action, moving her to hospice, signing a DNR, starting end-of-life medications, and more, all alone, suddenly and unexpectedly. My boyfriend was with me for every single step. He helped educate me on the choices I was making and kept me level-headed. He let me lean on him, vent, and ask for his opinions when I couldn't think clearly. He made sure I had support and company, drove me to the hospitals and hospice, and gave me so much love and understanding when I needed it the most. I don't know how I would have handled it on my own. After my mom passed, he moved in and began helping me with bills. There's so much more to this story, but these are the key points. He was and is amazing. We are now engaged. The last day I saw my mom alive, she had a brief moment of coherence. She looked at my boyfriend and smiled, saying, "Matthew, hey, butthead." Very much her sense of humor and a sign of affection. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.